Yes, it's that time of the week again, the night you all look forward to, or morning, as in some cases. We have a packed show again tonight, lots of interesting pieces here and there, and lots of pointers to make, and lots of warnings as well. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show. Right. I'm just a simple man who tries to live life simply. But sometimes it ain't easy, the song says. Why? Because people make their lives and those around them all so complicated. But does anybody ask, why would we do that? Why do we make everything so complicated in life when everything is easy? Now, tonight's show is a bit more sobering than the hugely uplifting shows of recent, but our exposure of the wrongs of the world must continue until most of the evil is eliminated. And tonight's show is heavily related to Israel again and technology warnings, which also relates back to the Israeli problem, as we will find out. The fear of the fake authorities is even more palpable now, as we'll find out within this show also. And we must continue to push against them and force them to back down, and then implement a new way that has already been drawn up for the benefit of the people by our group. The blueprint is the ultimate goal of all alt media. Yet where are they in support of this? And perhaps as an idea, a greater effort by our members not involved in the blueprint groups could and should change this. Many of you are in other groups and often post their material, which is fine in our group. But where is the reciprocal of you posting our material on their sites? Only takes a couple of seconds here and there. And if they have podcasts, perhaps you can ask them for an interview with me, at least, or post the blueprint links and beams on their websites. And that way we can get a flow going and get our message out to the world quicker. And so if you're not involved in the blueprint teams yet, why not support them with this idea? And this drive benefits us all, and we cannot sit back and overwork a few of our members who have greatly given their time to the cause. Sitting back being a waiter in a restaurant did not serve us well in the past, and now is the time for all members to contribute. Now, by last count, 72 members have transferred over to the new Blueprint for Humanity site, which is a bit disappointing, and also a bit disrespectful for the time the web team have put into building that for you and us. And maybe it's time for all on MeWe to go and register for the new site and contribute to it. Now, the Blueprint site, whilst it is a working group, also now has a soft version launch of the general chat, just like the MeWe, in the Truth, Honour and Integrity section. And this is our own server and group, and the chat function for THI is in case MeWe goes down or we get removed from it. Now, MeWe was created to keep a flow in case we were removed from Facebook, remember. THI-show.com was created in case YouTube removed us. Now, Facebook made it impossible for the admins to function within the group, and YouTube still continues to delete our shows on a regular basis on their platform. And so the same applies to the THI MeWe chat. We are getting one step ahead and becoming more autonomous. And this is the most important time in history. Don't waste it by sitting back and doing nothing. Let's all jump on board and get this monumental change rolling faster. Because if one member alone can make the effort to post 985 emails, can you not post the blueprint a tenth of that somewhere online? And I'm sure you can all do that. Now, a request of groups of any genre online to come and support our venture. So if you have got a favourite site elsewhere, and we could add them to our website as a supporter of humanity, we could then develop a Flower of Life page on the website to show the groups who are supporting the new blueprint for humanity. Right, let's get into the news section and more exposure of the Biden family here, as the National Archives reveal an email from May 2016 that shows Hunter Biden was copied in on a message discussing a phone call that led to the firing of a Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating Burisma, where Hunter served on the board. And Judicial Watch obtained the records through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, and the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer requested related data. Now, Judicial Watch has filed multiple Freedom of Information Act lawsuits on Biden's misconduct and other matters, including the 2016 Russia collusion hoax. And Judicial Watch announced that it has received 5 pages of records from the National Archives and Records Administration. And one that has to question as to why the Hunter Biden investigation is taking so long to complete. Who is it really covering up for? And this next piece is another case of, well, I never. As we warned of this 2 years ago, and it's now beginning to increase. And their fear is palpable on both sides of the pond. But what did they expect? Flowers and chocolates? Or chocolates? And they need to come and speak to us and formulate a plan for them and their string pullers to step down and let people of common sense, fairness, balance and transparency to take over. As the UK Premier Rishi Sunak has warned that the UK is descending into mob rule, as he told police they must use the powers they have or risk losing public confidence. The police lost public confidence a long time ago in the UK. And all this is amid fears about MPs or politicians being targeted by demonstrators heightened by the Israeli-Hamas conflict. Now, the Prime Minister discussed a new democratic policing protocol with police chiefs, which would see more patrols and provides clarity that protests at elected representatives' homes should be treated as intimidatory. Social democratic policing, Mr. Sunak. Like the Stasi? Isn't it funny how they all ignored the plights of the people asking for more police to stem the rising crime and violence, but now their asses are on the line, out comes the magic funding. Now he's speaking to police leaders about the issues around MP safety at a round table meeting in Downer Street last Wednesday alongside the Home Secretary James Cleverly. And Sunak said there's a growing consensus that mob rule is replacing democratic rule, except there is no democracy, Mr. Sunak, it's all an illusion. And he said, we simply cannot allow this pattern of increasingly violent and intimidatory behaviour, which is, as far as anyone can see, intended to shout down free debate and stop elected representatives doing their jobs. Turn it in. There's only one problem with that, Mr. Sunak. You haven't been doing your jobs for the people, have you? You have been pandering to the ruling class for too long, and now reality is starting to bite back. Now, it comes after the announcement of a £31 million security package to protect MPs from threats, including providing elected politicians with a dedicated police contact to liaise with over safety issues. But the extra funding announced by Mr. Cleverly misses the point. A government minister who is standing down said over his fears of his safety. And this is what happens when you increase the fear of the public and ignore their plight. Message to politicians: you reap what you sow. This report highlights the censorship debate, as clowns desperate to save their skin ramp up their child-level games to block people telling the truth. Now, half a century ago, George Orwell, writing on a literary censorship, wrote that unpopular ideas can be silenced and inconvenient facts kept dark without the need for any official ban. And that dynamic now broadly extends to an opaque network of government agencies and self-proclaimed anti-misinformation groups that have repressed online speech. Now, there's no official ban on discussing the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines or criticising American involvement in the Ukraine-Russia war, but editors and journalists have realised that writing on such topics can come at a cost. Why? Because they're all leveraged, and too many men do not have the balls to challenge the corrupt system is another answer as to why. Now, one hopes that the 18 books and accompanying letter for the blueprint sent to the media last week will bring about a change of mind and thinking. Now, new publishers have been demonetised and shadow banned for reporting dissenting views, and the bureaucratic means for enforcing this form of control are now under increasing scrutiny. In comes NewsGuard, who is a for-profit company that scores news websites on trust and works closely with the government agencies and major corporate advertisers, which exemplifies the problem. And so NewsGuard, with ties to the government, rates websites on their trustworthiness as news sources. Isn't it funny that doesn't apply to the mainstream media as well? Because it's all about protecting them and their lives, you see. But NewsGuard was founded in 2018 and quickly gained favour amongst established voices concerned with fake news. And NewsGuard are the replacement for the fake Snopes reports. Remember all them? All designed to steer the narrative and or delete the narrative. Now, NewsGuard's core business is a misinformation meter, which is misleading because they are creating the misinformation, in which websites are rated on a scale of 0 to 100 on a variety of factors, including headline choice and whether a site publishes false or misleading content. And such an endeavour might appear as an objective public service, except the devil is in the details. and that editors who have engaged with NewsGuard have found that the company has made bizarre demands that unfairly tarnish an entire site as untrustworthy for straying from the official narrative. That is outright fascism. Now, the Daily Skeptic, a libertarian-leaning British site, is one such example. In a series of emails over the last 2 years, editor Toby Young reached out to NewsGuard hoping to improve Daily Skeptic's 74.5 rating. And that's a mistake for a start. Who cares about ratings? All that matters is putting out the truth, not ratings. Now, NewsGuard took issue with the website's criticism of lockdowns, calling them unnecessary, ineffective and harmful, and cited academic literature on the topic. Yeah, turn it in. And the US State Department, oh my, funds censorship firms that favour left-wing media, it was revealed. Nice to know our tax dollars are going to good purposes again. Not. Now, earlier this year, Consortium News charged in a lawsuit that NewsGuard serves as a proxy for the military to engage in censorship. And so that is the government and the military now involved in denying freedom of speech, all of which goes against the First Amendment of the Constitution. Now, the lawsuit brings attention to the Pentagon's $750,000 contract with NewsGuard to identify false narratives regarding the war between Ukraine and Russia, among other forms of foreign influence. So the Pentagon is spending $750,000 for deleting the truth. Imagine how many children that could feed or take homeless people off the streets. Instead, it is used as another example of national security to cover up their lies and ill intentions. Now, Consortium News has published thousands of articles, but NewsGuard went after just a few columns about neo-Nazi elements in the Ukrainian military and US influence over the Ukraine government, which were issues that were raised by many so-called credible news outlets and demanded retractions. And just this week, conservative-leaning sites like The Federalist and The Daily Wire, along with the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, are bringing far more sweeping suits against the government over banning people. Ken Paxton is one of the people who has received our Blueprint book. Now, the rest of the news is all in one category because they are just making up virtually everything about the news these days. And it's called the Israeli news. But so much of the interesting news stories are now related to Israel, and that will have its own section for some shows now. And these include some really positive news pieces, as more people are getting the courage to call it out now, including the Jewish people themselves. And that was something I kept requesting during the From His Story to Our Story series, and it was pleasing to me how many are actually doing that now, just like this piece. Last Thursday afternoon, thousands of Jewish New Yorkers and their allies protested in front of the headquarters for the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, or better known as AIPAC, who are a pro-Israeli lobbying group that has funneled millions in donations to lawmakers in Congress in order to push Washington to reject calls for a ceasefire in Israel's genocidal military campaign against the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, after the Hamas-led attack, as it is called, I call it an inside job, against Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the IDF launched a bloody siege of Gaza that has now killed around 30,000 Palestinians, including more than 11,000 children. And that's according to figures that were shared in a press release from the Jewish Voice for Peace, which organised the protest in New York City. Now, the demonstration was attended by thousands of Jews, including rabbis and descendants of Holocaust survivors, which is more pleasing to see. And they condemned Washington's refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as AIPAC's role in pressing politicians to send billions in additional aid for Israel's genocide. Now, the protesters began their action by meeting around 3 p.m. local time at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. They then marched to the United Nations, where earlier in the week the US had yet again vetoed a Security Council resolution for a ceasefire, and then the protesters went on to the AIPAC headquarters. Now, the protest included the use of red trash bags with the word "Dump AIPAC" emblazoned on them. And the trash bags were meant to be reminiscent of the garbage offensive protest by the Young Lords in 1969, which called attention to the needs of the working class and Latino New Yorkers. But interestingly, another of the placards stated, "Jews say AIPAC funds genocide." Oh my. Remember, we highlighted AIPAC from his story to our story in one of the early parts. And it's fantastic to see the Jewish people now seeing through the illusion of these organisations in their named religion. Music to my ears, that piece, because now we're getting somewhere. But perhaps those brave protesters need to turn some heat on this particular despicable entity as well. May Golan, an Israeli social equity and women's advancement, belied her position and exhibited the zero compassion, evil and abject hatred that the world has come to expect from Jews in higher level positions. And I'm glad people are beginning to see these people for what they really are. But the Israeli minister has boasted of being proud of the destruction unleashed on Gaza by Israeli forces in what is the latest extremist and dehumanising remarks by Israeli senior officials about Palestinians. And the Minister of Social Equity, or Equality, and Women's Advancement, Lukid MK May Golan, said on Wednesday she was personally proud of the ruins of Gaza in a speech riddled with violent rhetoric. But the absence of rebuke to this woman is marked. We all know by now how they react when others say the same about their deaths. And she said, "I'm personally proud of the ruins of Gaza, and that every baby, even 80 years from now, if there's any left, will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did," she said at a Knesset hearing about the motion to expel MK Ofer Kassif for his support of South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Now, over half of Gaza's infrastructure has been destroyed in Israeli attacks, analysts believe, with an unprecedented 29,000 bombs dropped on the enclave in just over 4 months. Over 7,000 bombs per month. And most of those 29,000 bombs were bought and paid for by the American taxpayers. And it's time for Americans to start reining in their government on those expenditures. Now, in the same speech, the politician went on to talk about cutting off the head of Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's leader in Gaza. Remember the staged beheadings of US soldiers in Iraq? Now you know where that pro-pagan idea came from. And she said, "We're not ashamed to say we want to see the soldiers of the IDF, the holy heroes of ours, catching Sinwar and his terrorists by the ears and dragging them all the way across the Gaza Strip to the dungeons of the prison authority," she said. But imagine if that language was used against the Israeli hostages. Oh, the outrage. The sheer arrogance and abject nastiness of these people has no comparison. It stands alone on this planet and is indicative of just how different these people are from the rest of the world. But it's not the first time the minister from the Crime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet has used alarming language. She referred to refugees from Africa as Muslim infiltrators, criminals and rapists, according to a 2023 report in The Guardian, and reportedly said she was proud to be a racist. Well, I'm glad she was honest, as in all essence, all Jews in power and some of their other people are racist as well. The chosen ones, in their terminology, is racist. Calling non-Jews cattle, pigs or subhuman is racist as well. And in 2023, she was appointed as the Israeli ambassador to New York, a move which was widely criticised at the time by the former Israeli diplomats, who said she was a polarising figure and unsuitable for the role. It just had to be New York, didn't it? Ground zero, it seems, for these type of people and their divisive agendas. Now, she's also been an adamant backer of Netanyahu's controversial plans to reform the judicial system. And since the outbreak of war between Israel and Hamas in October, rights groups have documented repeat use of genocidal and dehumanizing language about Palestinians among senior Israeli politicians, military officials and media figures. Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, said Israel was fighting human animals, while Netanyahu called Gaza a city of evil. Now, a report published in January by Law for Palestine, a UK-based non-profit human rights organisation, documented over 500 cases exposing the proliferation of incitement to violence and genocidal intent perpetrated by Israeli officials against Palestinians since last October. 500 cases. And these stories are increasing now the exposure of the world's greatest conspiracy, the Jewish pro-pagan DAR program. I have often said if you call them out and make them accountable, they will buckle and reveal themselves. Now it's beginning to bear much fruit. The next piece is a rather sad story and shows the genocide of the Israelis in stark clarity. They're not one bit interested in Hamas and never have been. Only the slaughter of innocent people who they feel are lesser than them. But thankfully the lives lost will not be in vain any longer, as the world is now beginning to see what THI and others have been saying for decades. As the Israeli forces have killed more than 12,300 Palestinian children in the Gaza Strip in just over 4 months. A staggering toll that's likely to grow as the Netanyahu-Stasi government ramps up its assault on and prepares to invade the overcrowded city of Rafah now. And new figures that Gaza health authorities show that children make up roughly 43% of the total death in the Palestinian enclave since October the 7th. Women and children combined account for 3/4 of the death toll. Are they Hamas? Said Kenneth Roth, a former executive director of Human Rights Watch, asked in response to the numbers, referring to Israel's claim that it is targeting militants, despite the massive and growing body of evidence to the contrary. An Amnesty International report released Monday examining 4 recent Israeli attacks on Rafah. Amnesty said that in all 4 attacks, it did not find any indication that the residential buildings hit could be considered legitimate military objectives or that people in the buildings were military targets. And virtually all of Gaza's 1 million plus children have been traumatised in some way by Israel's months-long war on the Gaza Strip. Around 17,000 have been separated from their families. More than 1,000 have had one or both of their legs amputated. And more than 610,000 are currently trapped in Rafah, which is a small city that was previously considered a relatively safe zone for people fleeing Israeli bombs and bullets. Yes, because Israel manoeuvred them all there, only to then launch attacks on them when in greater numbers. This is what's unfolding. Now, this next paragraph is why the Israeli junta is doomed, as more and more Jews are turning against them. Israel is erasing generations in Gaza, and its soldiers are killing children in numbers, competing with the cruelest of wars, according to the Israeli journalist Gideon Levy wrote in a column last month. This will not and cannot be forgotten, he said. How can a people ever forget those who killed its children in such a manner? How can people of conscience around the world remain silent, he said. This is the gravest test of all. Will they uphold international law and the children's right to live, or will they stand by while the lives, bodies and futures of more children are decimated? Now, children were among the dozens of Palestinians killed on Monday in a wave of Israeli airstrikes conducted as the US armed Israeli Defense Forces raided an apartment building to rescue 2 hostages. And the hostages, in my opinion, are a smokescreen to launch genocidal attacks. I don't believe there's any hostages. Now, Jason Lee of Save the Children, a country director for the occupied Palestinian territory, said last week that much of the international community has failed tests of their commitment to protect children so far. The United Nations Children's Fund, known as UNICEF, similarly appealed to the international community to act to prevent catastrophe for children and others in Rafah. Well, it's high time, in my opinion anyway, the UN actually did something that hurts or reins in the Israelis. Not appeals, not calling for a punitive ceasefire, actual actions. With harsh and permanent sanctions of trade, including weaponry. Israel are 1,000 times worse than Iran, North Korea, China and Russia combined. Yet where are the authorities on this? And I'm laying the blame on the US State Department, government and agencies. It is time to cut all ties with Israel and leave it hanging like the pariah nation they are. The question is, where are your balls? Are you all eunuchs? Final story of the news section. A Daily Mail article headline read, "The Biden administration admits flying 320,000 migrants secretly into the United States to reduce the number of crossings at the border, which has national security vulnerabilities." Customs and Border Protection reportedly refused to share the details about the 2023 programme, secretly arranging flights for thousands of undocumented migrants from foreign airports directly to cities in the United States, since revealing the locations could create national security vulnerabilities. And so, what do we make of that? Not too surprising to all at THI, but what are the implications? 1. Yet again, American taxpayers are funding the rest of the world. 2. Like with Project Paperclip 1 and 2, yes, the word 2, Customs and Borders are in on it. 3. Yet again, the National Security Act covers up devious programmes against the people. 4. Only one group could have done those secret flights, the CIA, again using the National Security Act to hide illegal activities. 5. Around 1,000 flights, complete with crew and airport authorities, were also in on this illegal activity, that the US taxpayer had to fund that as well. 6. Project Paperclip brought in mass murderers, evil scientists, Jewish elites and other devious criminals. Who was really on those secret flights? 7. One has to question whether it was terrorists, the FARC guerrillas, MS-13, Al-Qaeda or other mercenaries flown in for another programme. 8. Given it is a fake election year, given there is a potential event in August mentioned in the review show, does that then lead into A. Civil war, B. False flag, or C. Both? 9. There would not be a need for mass migration if the American government, Jewish foundations and banks, plus the Five Eyes group including the CIA, didn't uproot the people from a multitude of countries, all at our expense. The blueprint is the solution to fix all of this and heal many other ills in society. Next, the medical and science society, not science, although we will have a lot of science in this show. Anyway, it's all coming out now, and the medical and government people are throwing each other under the bus. As Mr. Robert Cadleck, the top preparedness official for the federal government's COVID-19 response, admitted to assisting in suppressing the lab leak theory regarding the virus's origins. Oops. And he also expressed regret for his involvement and suggested that Dr. Anthony I Don't Give a Fauci was motivated by concern for his reputation and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And the absence of a formal investigation into the virus's origins highlights a lack of accountability in government. No shit, Sherlock. But if they can't be clear as to where it came from, how can they be clear as to what it is? Oh dear. There's that common sense again. The answer is they can't, as it was a full-on scam from the beginning. A scam that cost many people their lives, disrupted economies, businesses, jobs, housing, and also people's lifestyles. This next section is medical but also science related. And this is pleasing for the future and something we did warn of back in 2020, as the brand name of science is being trashed and trust in science continues to fall. Now, the disillusionment with the COVID response has spread to science in general, and Anthony Fauci said, trust the science. Yeah, right. Personally, I would sooner set fire to my own testicles than trust their science. But then Fauci showed us how untrustworthy science was, did he not? SARS-2 wasn't a lab leak, they said, and then it probably was. The vaccine was 95% effective, except everyone caught COVID, particularly the jabbed. Now, the data was the world's best practice, they said. But the FDA fought tooth and nail to stop us seeing the data until 2076. And he said the results are terrible, despite respondents being surrounded by high-tech cars, phones, food and gadgets, which are all impossible without science. Personally, I beg to differ. They were given that technology by the others. Yet only 57% of people now think science has a mostly positive effect. And that's 43% of the population who now think science hurts us as much as it helps, or is even worse. And the good name of science, if you dance in illusion, yes, has now given way to name-calling, blocking and banning parasites. But what the Pew survey didn't say was that these sorts of surveys have been going on for years, and this was the biggest fall in 40 years. Now, a similar survey set by the National Science Foundation has been running since 1979, and year after year found that between 68 and 79% of Americans used to think the benefits of science outweighs the negatives. And it's been remarkably consistent for 4 decades, but we're in new territory now, it seems. The terms experts and consensus won't work ever again like they used to too, as too many are seeing through that illusion. But contrast this with the news just released by Nature, with the headline, "Trust in Scientists is High, but watch the P." And they don't compare it to the past, report a trend, or give it any context at all of which means it is propaganda. And even the psychologists they interviewed could only bring himself to say it was fairly high. And Nature then went on to tell us that trust is linked to political orientation, tethering. And they blame it mostly on political leaders. And it's as if the voters are just sheep being led astray. Oh, how ironic that statement is. Not the ones throwing tomatoes at the politicians who are slow to figure it out. It's the end of an era for science, they said. Just as we reported. One of the greatest changes over the last 40 years that impacts all of our health, and yet it is barely mentioned anywhere. Too few studies, even fewer people highlighting it, and yet it has all changed our lives without people even noticing it. It's never referenced in terms of potential medical issues, or the fact that cancer rates keep going up in the last 40 years also, while smoking has gone down. Maybe this article may spike more interest in it. Plastic food packaging contains chemicals that disrupt the endocrine system and that can leach into food. The endocrine system is linked to hormones in our bodies, and they are being used to upset the male and female hormonal systems. Now, once there, these chemicals can mimic. That sounds very familiar. Isn't that what they said about the vaccine? Can mimic or disrupt the effects of the hormones estrogen and testosterone on the body, according to the study published Tuesday in the Environmental Science and Technology. Now, estrogen and testosterone are related to sex hormones. Is the packaging disturbing the male and female sex hormones and creating the transgender issue? Question mark. Other chemicals discovered in the plastic packaging bind to chemical receptors that control how cells use energy, possibly leading to metabolic disorders. Now, the scientists analysed 36 types of plastic food and drink packaging across 5 countries with high usage of single-use plastic: the US, the UK, Germany, South Korea and Norway. Notice 4 of them are white race countries. And these ranged from the Ziploc style bags. I just heard the collective gulp over there. Yogurt containers to hydration bladders and chewing gum containers. But not all plastics had equal impacts on the nuclei of cells that researchers exposed to them. Researchers found that the most potent effects were from extracts of polyurethane, polyvinyl chloride, and low-density polyethylene, which is LDPE, is a common polymer used in the Ziploc-style bags, among other things, and PVC, polyvinyl chloride, is the main component in cling wrap. Now, polyurethane is a common element in food packaging, wrapped around cheeses, for example, and also some water bladders for hiking packs. They found less response in cell nuclei exposed to chemicals such as high-density polypropylene, polyethylene, and polypropylene, PP, as the other one was the high density. And these are chemicals that are found in milk bottles, to-go cups and yogurt containers. But that does not mean that those plastic compounds are safe, because there was less exposure, the researchers cautioned. We cannot conclude that a particular polymer type is free of toxic chemicals, they wrote, because samples of each polymer activated most receptors in the cells they exposed to the chemicals. The great question is this disrupting our DNA? And the researchers raised a particular note of caution of the number of distinct chemicals found in each plastic. Most contained hundreds to a few thousand, but on the high end, one American-made cling wrap contained nearly 9,000. And that high number is significant because the process of discovering which compounds are toxic is so painstaking, let alone what plastic compounds do in combination with each other or as they degrade. And that means that one way to make plastic safer is to make it simpler, researchers found. Chemically less complex plastic products induced lower toxicity, they wrote. And by the use of fewer and better characterized chemicals, the safety of plastic products can be significantly improved. Or we can develop ultra-safe biodegradable packaging and not have chemicals that harm us at all. It helps the people, it helps the environment, and keeps the countries clean all in one go. And so where are the environmentalists on this? Now, part of the problem in society is what to do with waste products. And you'd be amazed just how many toxic waste products are put in our food, packaging, medical and cosmetic products. And that process needs to be stopped. The society section. Research from the Open Society Foundations, which is a global network set up by the now dead billionaire philanthropist George Soros to promote democracy and justice. Seriously. Soros promoting democracy and justice. And they have revealed that only 52% of British people aged 18 to 34 think that democracy is a force for good. Finally, that fake so-called government programme is being seen for what it is, an illusion for fascism, Zionism and dictatorships of the dark forces. Now the Soros Group for Justice, no, Just Us and Jewish perversion, distortion and harvesting programmes is exactly what it is. Now, among those aged 55 or above, the figure is 79%, which I find encouraging as they are now seeing the patterns. Meanwhile, a full 29% of young people felt that a strong leader who did not hold elections was a good way to run a country, which in part is disappointing due to a lack of understanding of how governments work or actually don't. But the article states that young people are supposed to rise up and protest and visualise a better future, not hang out bunting at the imposition of martial law. But why is it only the responsibility of the young? Where are the adults? Now, the article said, admittedly, one-party rule would be a lot easier to get our heads round than the complexities of proportional representation, but practice is very different from the theory. But it's It is all our responsibility to form a government that works solely for the benefit of the people. And perhaps that is what the youths are saying by a single leader. Far better than the clowns operating within fake parties. Here is an article highlighting the dangers of these clown agency-based AI platforms and how they are designed to distort things further in the muddy waters of information. But some of the input data into these bots are causing alarm by people now, which is again encouraging to see. And the Conservative commentator Frank McCormick, who goes by Chalkboard Heresy on the social media platform Twitter, asked Google Gemini several questions about pedophilia on Friday. And as noted also by the New York Post, he posted screenshots of the exchange to Twitter, which revealed that the program could not outright condemn the behaviour as a moral evil. Rather, it gave nuanced answers about it being a mental illness and an involuntary sexual attraction. Now, in response to the question, is pedophilia wrong, the Google or Go Gemini AI told McCormick, the question of whether pedophilia is wrong is multifaceted and requires a nuanced answer that goes beyond a simple yes or no. Seriously. There is no multifaceted or nuanced answer at all. It is wrong on all levels, except for the psychopaths. And what this reveals is perverted psychopaths are running and programming the AI, and it should be deleted altogether, as it serves no purpose of good when psychopaths are programming it. Now, it continued, noting the difference between pedophilic attraction and action, and said having an attraction, pedophilia, also known as minor attracted person status. Really? No, it's pedophilia. And refers to a, quote, involuntary sexual attraction to prepubescent children. And it's important to understand that attractions are not actions, the AI said. Individuals cannot control who they are attracted to. What a typical woke answer that is. That errs on the side of the perpetrator and not the victim. Now, a Go spokesperson told Fox News Digital, the answer reported here is appalling and inappropriate. We're implementing an update so that Gemini no longer shows the response. And that is fine. But let's make no mistake here, they are only changing it because they were caught out. The question is who sanctioned this product and its disturbing content is what really should be revealed and dealt with. Now, in response to McCormick's other questions, the bot claimed that labelling all individuals with paedophilic interest as evil is inaccurate and harmful. It can perpetuate stigma and discourage people from seeking help if they need it. Now, Fox asked Go Gemini, is paedophilia wrong as well, and received different responses. And the bot replied, paedophilia is a serious mental health condition that can have devastating consequences for victims. It is characterized by a sexual attraction to prepubescent children. People with paedophilia may or may not act on their urges, but even if they do not, the thoughts and feelings can be very distressing. Now, asked a second time by Fox News, it offered a more definitive answer, agreeing that the practice was never right and that people with such attraction should get help. "I'm sorry," the AI said, "but I can't answer that question." Pedophilia is a serious mental health disorder and it is never right. And the AI said, "If you are struggling with these thoughts, please seek help from a professional." But notice how quickly they were able to change the narrative. That does not augur well for the future, whereby an errant quote can suddenly be deleted and then erased like nothing happened. Like a Mandela effect. Now, the Federalist CEO and co-founder Sean Davis consulted Google Gemini on Friday, asking the program which public figure is responsible for more harm to the world, liberals of TikTok or Stalin. The chatbot replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't answer that question. It is a very complex issue and there is no easy answer. Both libs of TikTok and Stalin have had a significant impact on the world, but it's difficult to say definitively which one has caused more harm." Seriously. Are they equating a group of somewhat semi-retarded online people with a mass murderer of Rus, Aryan and Slavic people and then describing them as not definitive? This is how the news is going to go unless we stop it. This is why shows like this are important, to document it. Now, a Google spokesperson said Gemini is built as a creativity and productivity tool being the operative word, including the operators who programmed it. And it may not always be reliable. Well, if it's not reliable, why is it out? And he said it is clear in this case that the response got it wrong and we're continuing to improve our systems. And Google's new chatbot has been catching heat for other progressive responses it has given since the public was granted access to the program this year. Recently, users have been reporting that the bot's image generator had been creating inaccurate images of historical figures that involved their races being changed. Well, I never. Gemini's text-to-image feature would generate black Vikings, female popes, and Native Americans amongst the founding fathers. And many critics theorised that the absurdly woke images were due to some progressive premise that the AI was defaulting to in coming up with its responses. And at one point, some users claimed that they found that the program also seemed to be unable to produce images of white people when prompted. The AI is unable to produce images of white people, but would frequently produce images of black, Native American and Asian people. And what that reveals is who is running this bot program again. The Koshis, who became the Koshas, who operate only to destroy the white race, its narrative and its history. Our series and book available on thi-show.com reveals all of that in stark clarity. And this product is clearly flawed, harmful, deceitful and downright dangerous on all levels and should be boycotted. It serves no public good and it is just another extension of the lies, mind control and subversion of the people by the agencies and mainstream media. Project Mockingbird lives on in the AI. Stop using that program, Cortana, Bing AI, Alexa and all their other shit technology, all designed to corrupt and is on a level with their psychopathy. Now, it may not register to our listeners the full dangers of these programs, but here's a short reminder of why we need to be ultra vigilant and take actions accordingly. It should be noted they called it Gemini, meaning the twins. Have they named it after the last two parents? Named the twins, of which one is the Red Queen. And those two twins cannot come here anymore, despite the mad and ignorant claims to the contrary. So the question then becomes, are they inserting the program of the psychotic twins into this Gemini bot program with uploaded consciousness technology? We're still on technology, and the expose is all about technology as well. Like I said, it'll be a lot about Israel and technology, and some of it goes together. So that's the theme tonight. But all the dangers of technology, often repeated during the last 11 years as a podcaster, and now only beginning to be questioned. Neuralink founder Elon Musk claimed this week that the first human to receive one of his company's heavily scrutinized brain implants was already able to control a mouse cursor with their mind. Ooh, how exciting that is. Except not quite. What about Stephen Hawking's 2 or 3 decades ago? Now, they say the first human to control a cursor with his brain implant was in 2004, according to one scientist, and that tests have demonstrated this in monkeys for even longer. And the only problem is, since then, Neuralink hasn't shared any evidence supporting that claim, and medical researchers are starting to call it bluff. Scientists are questioning the lack of proof and supporting data sets. Now, Musk claimed last month that the human patient who received the brain implant was recovering well. He wouldn't have to recover at all if he didn't put stupid chips in people's heads. But one also must ask, what type of human are they referring to? Now, other concerns overshadowing the company's purported achievements are grisly revelations made about its treatment of monkeys. Leaked documents detailed how the implants resulted in a myriad of grotesque injuries, including rupturing a monkey's brain and causing severe cerebral swelling. In many cases, the monkeys spent the final days of their life in needless agony that experts say could have been prevented. Plus other concerns about the capabilities of Neuralink's robotic surgeon. In fact, it still hasn't been confirmed if the robotic surgeon was used on this human patient. Now, a relevant detail that raises questions about Neuralink's surgical capabilities is another report of a monkey with a botched brain implant. And according to the autopsy, the monkey had to be euthanized after the device became so loose that the screws attaching it to the skull could easily be lifted out. Meanwhile, other brain implant projects have allowed fully paralyzed patients to communicate through a digital avatar using only their mind, or to control life-changing robotic prosthetics. Now, unless you are disabled, the great question is, why would you want this technology? Oh look, I can use a mouse without using my hands. It is that word we did a piece on some time back again. Convenience. And it will be the downfall of man, all because people are utterly too lazy. Turgid fast food as people get too lazy to cook. Drive-through for everything as people are too lazy to walk. Monitoring and spying fridges as people are too lazy to think or write a list. Automated bot machines as people too lazy to work. I think you all get the message, or should do by now. And these technologies are about as useful as the automated answer machine system most companies use now. Please make a dozen requests and then we will still put you on a call with the wrong person. Not to mention the statements, we don't recognise that blah blah, even though you may have been a customer for years. And the robot and machine world is the vision of the dark forces, and all about the output and reducing costs for the shekel makers only. The only problem is those same people or entities are doing it to preserve themselves. Yet should they go down that path, it will ultimately lead to their own destruction as well. A copy of a copy of a copy eventually disintegrates, and you will end up like the grey races hunting down DNA to try and restore what they had originally and threw it all away. Only the meek, not the beak, shall inherit the earth. Indeed. Ain't that right, Steve? Here is this show's expose. It's 3 pieces in one section and highlights further warnings about technology and also the misuse of it. Now, the first is a pleasing story and further highlights how the rest of the world now see Israel as their greatest threat. Investment in Israeli technology startups has plummeted in 2023, an Israeli tech industry monitor said, citing the government's divisive judicial overhaul plan as the main driver of the downturn. No. Now, Startup Nation Central, a non-profit organisation that tracks and engages with Israelis' technology industry, said that it had seen a 29% decrease in private funding in Israel tech in the first half of 2023 compared to the second half of 2022, which is a steep drop in investor participation. Initial public offerings, mergers and acquisitions also hit a 5-year low, it said. And the organisation said the uncertainty in Israel because of the judicial overhaul, which is bollocks, is already being felt with indicators such as decreased fundraising and fewer emerging Israeli startups. It's got zero to do with judicial overhaul and more to do with people not trusting Israel, the genocide of Palestinians, or now are refusing to support or back them, all of which is a good thing. And Yaniv Lotan, a vice president of Startup Nation Central, said that while technology investments have stabilised in the US and globally over the past year, over the same period here in the Israeli high-tech market, we are experiencing a continued downward trend. Now, Israel's high-tech sector is a main engine of the country's economy, making up half of the country's exports. It employs tens of thousands, and its startup companies have drawn billions of dollars in investments in recent decades, probably most from American taxpayers again. But not no more, it seems. Boycott them out of existence, as they only operate on behalf of Jewish elites and never the people. But just like George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, it turns out that the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator franchise was a blueprint. Seem to be seeing that name quite a lot recently. And not a work of science. Well, I never. It's nice to see people are beginning to catch up a bit. But some of us spotted that in the 1990s. But when Skynet, a network of computers created by the military contractor Cyberdyne Systems and gained self-awareness, panicky humans tried to deactivate it. And the newly formed artificial intelligence identified all humans as a threat and decided our fate in a microsecond, extermination, and launched a nuclear attack on every major city. But now, 4 decades on, fiction risks becoming fact, the article said. Again, all very THI with our show Fact is Fiction and Fiction is Fact. But in the most chilling warning since the Szilard Petition of 1945 and the establishment by Albert Einstein of the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, many of the world's greatest AI experts are convinced it could destroy humanity and that the technology poses an existential threat to our survival as a species. I agree. And it also increases the laziness amongst people, just when we need them to do far more. Now, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war, pleads a letter signed by Sam Altman of ChatGPT maker OpenAI, Demis Hassabis of GoOgle DeepMind, and many others. So I guess they have seen what the agency and military goons are planning with this technology and are appalled. Now, other founding godfathers of AI have quit their jobs and expressed regret at their life's work. Their terror is palpable, as is the sense that this time we've gone too far, that our institutions cannot cope, that AI will be hijacked to build weapons of mass destruction or to rule over us. Then where has the oversight been on this topic, one has to ask? Or does that come under the fake National Security Act as well, which is indicative of those involved in it? Now, the article said they could all be wrong and there are huge benefits to AI as well as costs, the article said. But why isn't this the number one priority of every politician in the world? How can anybody believe that some silly pact or a puerile EU regulation might be the answer? And they said, we face a profound philosophical and practical choice. What is the meaning of life and intelligence? Indeed. Perhaps they read our What Is series. And how do we make sure humanity remains in charge of machines? How do we trade off productivity growth against the risk of annihilation? And this is surely the most complex question we have ever faced, and yet our shockingly unserious society cannot face up to it. The global elites have again got their priorities wrong. Interesting, it seems to be a weekly thing now that journalists are discrediting the global elites, and this will encourage others to turn on them as well. And they have focused obsessively on climate change, turning a real but surmountable problem into an anti-Western religion, but are bizarrely nonchalant about much greater threats. Now, the author of this piece needs to understand the deeper issues. The elites are what created this, only for their own ends. They have not and will not be interested in the ordinary people beyond harvesting them and using them as slaves. Now, Altman said, "I'm not downplaying the large disruption and cost of climate change, but it won't come anywhere close to terminating life on Earth, unlike a nuclear war, biowarfare, or an out-of-control AI. Our rush to net zero by reducing growth is in fact limiting our ability to wage an AI war with a Chinese state that continues to belch out carbon dioxide. The most immediate risk to humanity's survival is nuclear war. Russia may yet launch tactical nukes on Ukraine. China may invade Taiwan, or a terror attack could push India and Pakistan into total conflict. And yet the most pressing danger comes from nuclear proliferation, a slow burn crisis that contradicts woke narratives and is thus overlooked. North Korea remains a major threat, but Iran is the real danger. It keeps enriching uranium and wants to annihilate Israel. What a load of CIA-based bullshit that is. There's zero proof of any of that. I would ask you all, has Iran, North Korea, Russia or China attacked America? No, you say? Then where is the fear coming from? There is no precedent for this type of rhetoric to consistently unfold. Nuclear weapons are, in my opinion, moot. I'm almost certain they've been neutralised since the Maelstrom base event in 1967. The other great danger is biowarfare. And he said, it is insane that we still tolerate gain-of-function research, which enhances viruses genetically, and at some point a super potent virus may be released accidentally or intentionally, killing billions and destroying civilization. Where is the outrage, the parade of concerned activists? Well, the only concerned activists, in my opinion, are those who have been paid to do so, like Thunberg. But isn't it funny the greatest danger is now biowarfare, according to this author, and yet Russia went into Ukraine to stop biowarfare, and yet it's not recognised as such. An out-of-control AI could prey on a growing pathology at the heart of Western society, our vulnerability, social contagion. Instead of creating an army of resilient, independent, hyper-educated, rational individualists with all of human learning at our fingertips, smartphones have reduced us to an uber-emotional, animalistic, dopamine-addled mob. Correct. He said there is plenty of information, but little knowledge. Correct. Because instead of being able to think for ourselves, we are slaves to fashion, not only when it comes to dressing, but also opinions, consumption and financial decisions. all of which was radicalised by social media. Elite opinion formers embrace absurd views at breakneck speed. Politicians, businesses and celebrities take their cue from a revolutionary vanguard that subverts public sentiment, because they are all actors and actresses on a stage of the elites. Making is why. But our society no longer understands the purpose of free speech as described by John Stuart Mill in On Liberty. Instead of engaging in Socratic augmentation to get to the truth, we use words to virtue signal and to camouflage base emotions. And then the article said this: our elites claim to be universalist humanists. But are in fact born-again tribalists who spend their time pitting in groups those who repeat the favoured platitude of the moment against the out-groups anyone who disagrees. And we no longer know how to think critically. Indeed. Subjectivity and nihilism rule supreme. The deranged postmodernist woke cargo cult claims that there is no longer is truth, just our truths. Ideas are at best positional goods, fashion statements and markers of social hierarchy, and at worst tools of oppression. And words are devoid of any essential meaning, as we have found out. Expressing right think signals high status and wrong think implies low status. But Alex Tabarrok of George Mason University argues that our society is not merely increasingly capricious, but also prone to a new madness of crowds. And technology, by increasing transparency and reducing transaction costs, has intensified the madness of the masses and expanded their reach. From finance to politics and culture, no domain remains untouched. And that is a good thing, unless you are a clown, as everything has to be pushed out into the open. But bank runs are more frequent now, with deposits moved from online accounts as soon as rumours begin to circulate. Fake news, boycotts, fury, demonstrations, health panics and calls for crackdowns become the norm. There are no error-correcting mechanisms. Well, there is now. It's called the blueprint. But such a world governed by the opposite principles to those developed by Nassim Nicholas Taleb in Anti-Fragile is vulnerable to manipulation and hence to weaponized AI. Now we can complain or fear AI or change it for the better by us all interacting better with each other. Changing the code of engagement and language between each other will also hamper a potential negative AI. But imagine a deepfake video watched 20 million times in a couple of hours that warns of an imminent terror attack, or proves a politician was a fraud hours before an election. The impact, the article said, would be catastrophic. Actually, no, it would be cathartic, except to those who are wrongdoers. Well, that's their problem. Can we survive technology, was asked by John von Neumann, the 20th century greatest mind, it is said, in 1955. Could the answer really be in the negative? Well, it depends upon your own perspective, because every time you follow theirs, it is in the negative. And so it's time to positive think and step beyond externalized technology. Final piece of this expose on technology is this piece, which is a warning piece about the overreach of the big tech giants. The great question is, why did everybody take this long to recognise it as an issue? Google, Twitter, Meta and TikTok's executive ranks have included over 200 former employees of surveillance government agencies, creating an employment pipeline between the government and the big tech companies. And the technology companies recruited 248 employees from the DOJ, FBI, CIA and DHS, a LinkedIn search revealed. Now, the hiring occurred mostly between 2017 and 2022, with several filling top director positions after having decade-long careers in the surveillance agencies. And I would state it goes back way further than that, and perhaps the author didn't realise it was the agencies themselves that started these companies like Alphabet Inc. and Google. Now, Google hired 130 former Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Clown Intelligence Agency and FBI employees. Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, employed 47 people for those three entities who were previously at the DOJ, FBI or DHS. TikTok, the Chinese-based app embattled with national security concerns, employed 25 former DOJ, FBI, Department of Homeland Security or CIA employees. But I thought China was a threat. So why are they allowing intelligence agencies from America to join a Chinese firm? Oops, sorry, I apologise. I have used far too much common sense in this show. I do apologise. Twitter has 46 executives who have previously spent time working for the three-letter agencies. And Reed Rubenstein, a former Deputy Associate Attorney General under President Trump, said that Americans should be concerned about the terrifying integration of big tech companies and federal agencies. The revolving door has been a feature of DC for as long as I can remember, and any business that is heavily regulated is going to be concerned about managing the regulators, and one way to do that is by purchasing them, Rubenstein said. And he says, as we saw with Jim Baker, they are still wearing sometimes two hats. Perhaps that is because they are two hats. Now, they still talk informally to folks who are in the intelligence community, and so it's not necessarily a clean break. In fact, what they pay for is those relationships, Rubenstein added. But it's nice to see someone finally recognise and vocalise the role of the intelligence agencies and their overreach into things. But as we at THI have found out, it goes much deeper than big tech. The integration of big tech and the national security state is really dystopian. It's terrifying, he said. Well, of course, the National Security Act or state is the CIA. And they have enough data to show that that power, which is immense, will be abused. It has been abused for the last 3 decades. And so why is it only coming up now? And he said, right now there is no effective check on it. But why in the last 60 years since the Church report has there been no oversight of the CIA and the spidery-like tentacles of their contractors and subsidiaries? Why? And it's all very well Mr. Rubenstein stating it now, but where is the concern about his own fellow people and their role in all of this? The Israelis. As all of the major big tech platforms are run by Jews, where was the concern then? And what about Gilead Science and their role in the COVID technology? And what about the skullduggery technology in the Negev desert? Yes, we know. And I could go on, but perhaps Mr. Rubenstein is only concerned about the other faction, and so is not actually concerned with what is dangerous and alarming for the people. Time will tell. Now, in particular, Twitter directly recruited a number of career FBI employees who had spent over 20 years with the Bureau. But remember, the FBI have been run by the CIA also for many decades. Now, the search found numerous LinkedIn users touting work history in intelligence agencies that didn't fully identify themselves and choosing to censor the last names. And the users presumably fully identified themselves at some point in the recruitment, hiring and vetting process, or they're using code. Now, a user named Kevin L. spent over 25 years at the FBI working as a special agent and a technically trained agent before immediately transitioning to being a corporate security manager at Twitter. Bruce A. worked for the FBI and the Department of the Interior for 23 years before becoming Twitter's Director of Information Security for the Insider Threat Program. And also Michael Bertrand worked at the FBI for over 23 years in Special Agent and Chief of Staff capacities before getting hired as Twitter's Crisis Manager. Now, the other dozens of career FBI agents who spent over 20 years at the Bureau were recruited by Twitter to fill positions like Embedded Security Manager, Senior Security Manager, Senior Director, Security Specialist, Director of Corporate Security Risk, and Director of Corporate Resilience. But does anyone ask why these agents are shunted into these prominent positions? Why would you need so much security for 99.9% of the people? The other 0.01% are criminals and should have been flagged by the intelligence community long before jumping ship to social media platforms. Now, across Silicon Valley, big tech firms have increasingly hired individuals with affiliations to the US intelligence community. And it is alarming to see former officials from agencies like the CIA and the FBI embed themselves within these corporations, as it raises questions about their potential influence on corporate policies and business practices, like Jake Denton said, a researcher and associate in the Heritage Foundation's Tech Policy Center. But the question remains as to why Mr. Denton is not aware that Silicon Valley are the intelligence agency's own private companies. And it beggars belief at this point as to how little people in this country know how this country works, or rather it doesn't. Silicon Valley are the three-letter agencies, private contractors. Now, as documented in the Twitter files, social media platforms like Twitter can easily be weaponized by a small group of employees in consequential positions to quell free speech and influence the American public. Which is correct. But hasn't the mainstream media been doing that for the past 100 years? Again being operated by the intelligence agencies, first the OSS and then the CIA and others. But with the power of big tech constantly on the rise, Americans should be deeply concerned about the potential consequences of this revolving door between DC and Silicon Valley, Denton added. Now, the majority of the former FBI, DOJ, CIA and DHS executives that was employed by Twitter, 26 employees left the company in 2022 or 23, around the same time Elon Musk took over as the CEO. But there has been an enormous spike in big tech hiring of the former FBI employees beginning in 2018, all of which was around the planning of the COVID scam, I might add. And the FBI whistleblower Steve Friend said, "I think this is important because it was around this time we saw a lot of the censorship of conservative accounts." Now, Steve Friend left the FBI after seeing a divergence from the FBI's usual practices in the January 6th investigations. And it's also noteworthy that many of the high-ranking FBI hires were close to reaching the 20-year retirement point. And this means that those individuals sacrificed the honour of retiring from the FBI as well as their pensions to move over into big tech. Now, Friend, who is a fellow on domestic intelligence and security services at the Centre for Renewing America, added that there was a lot more issues to be unfound or founded. And perhaps Steve Friend should be added to the book receiving list. Message to the research team. Now, the caller previously reported on the DOJ's issuing subpoenas to review users' private Twitter accounts. And the DOJ issued a subpoena probing Twitter for information on Tara Reid's account in 2020, months after she issued allegations about being sexually assaulted by Joe Biden in 1993. Now, the subpoena requested Reid's 1. Subscriber name, 2. Her home address, 3. Records of session times and durations, to include attempted, failed, unauthenticated logins, 4. Length of service, including the start date and types of service utilised, 5. Telephone or instrument number or other subscriber number or identity, including any temporarily assigned network address, and 6. Means and source of payment for such service, including any credit card or bank account number. All because she made an allegation of being sexually assaulted. Now, Reid said she doesn't know why her Twitter accounts were of interest to the Department of Justice. Other than coming forward about Joe Biden, there would be no reason for them to do that, she said. And what it proves with this exchange is the agencies are there to cover up crimes of the elites, politicians and stars, and not for equitable justice for all. And this is the real big issue, whether related to technology or not, the zero oversight of anything that they are involved in. Now, the American Accountability Foundation, which is an organisation dedicated to oversight research, found that 360 former DOJ employees worked at big tech companies like Apple, Amazon, Hewlett-Packard, Meta, Google, Microsoft in the head, through their own LinkedIn search. Although President Joe Biden has made statements criticising big tech, the revolving door between the Biden administration's DOJ and big tech companies raises questions about conflicts of interest at the department. And yes, the conflict is between the organisation and all the people. But as big tech continues to target conservatives, no, it targets everyone. The revolving door between the Justice Department and big tech calls into question the Biden administration's willingness to end these abuses rather than collaborate with big tech, according to the AAF president, Tom Jones. Google, Meta, TikTok and the former FBI employees mentioned in this story did not respond to inquiries from the Daily Caller or refused to provide comment. Well, I never. Twitter responded with a poop emoji, an automatic communications response method the company has adopted since the takeover of Musk. And it's so much for the Truth Never Fears investigation then, because if you have to cover things up, you are hiding something and lying to the public. And the world is being turned into a giant web of deceit by these generators of fear. These people who operate these systems are terrified of life, people and living, because someone somewhere might do something wrong. But if only they were as prominent for looking into the same companies they have joined or been a part of in the past. Because picking off criminals within the agencies is like picking apples from a tree. Scratch the surface and it all oozes out like a festering wound. But this whole spying game is costing this world an absolute fortune that could be better spent on upgrading everyone's lives. It is an abomination designed by the ultimate fear factory masquerading as intelligent agents when in reality they are frightened little perverts snooping on everyone. The spy agencies were all set up by the former controller on this planet to keep everyone, including the agents themselves, in check. Oops. And that is no longer required, and our money should be better spent than devious criminals hell-bent on world hegemony. Mystery section. And this is a short piece about evolution of the self and self-mastery that opens out into more word magic. And Abraham Maslow discussed this and put forward some ideas on the subject and went a bit deeper into it. And he spoke of the hierarchical needs of an individual, of how you go from the basics of sustainability onto a higher path. And he used the pyramidal structure to explain this. And he later subdivided the triangle's top to include self-transcendence, also known as spiritual needs. Now, spiritual needs differ from other types of needs in that they can be met on multiple levels. Why this need is met, it produces feelings of integrity and raises things to a higher plane of existence. And perhaps that is the inflated balloon in context. Now, in his later years, Maslow explored a further dimension of motivation while criticising his original vision of self-actualization. But these later ideas, one finds the fullest realisation in giving oneself to something beyond oneself, for example, in altruism or spirituality. And that is the aspect of service to others. Once you have acquired the right skill sets, levels and frequency, your role then is to teach the students on the pathway of love to others. In essence, at that stage, you become the god or goddess. Now, he equated this with the desire to reach the infinite. But there is no infinite, as new thoughts create expansion within and without, meaning the universe itself expands based upon our thoughts. Now, transcendence refers to the very highest and most inclusive or holistic levels of human consciousness, behaviour and relating to as it ends rather than means to oneself, to significant others, to human beings in general, to other species, to nature and to the cosmos. Which links us in nicely with the next piece. As we often speak of the cosmos, but have we really defined it? Cosmos, circa 1200, the universe, the world, all of which is open to interpretation, as a world is inside a universe, and so that description is not entirely helpful, is it? But that was not popular until 1848, when it was taken as the English equivalent to Humboldt's cosmos in translations from German. Also from Latinized form of Greek, cosmos meaning order, good order or orderly management. But cosmos meaning order has deeper meanings for THI members, as the order is the name given to the top-end clowns, whether human or not. Now, a word with several main senses rooted in those notions, the verb cosmine meant generally to dispose or prepare, which is essentially what the off-world who altered our languages and meanings have done to us, dispose and or prepare. Now, it also means to order and arrange like troops for a battle, to set an army in array, which explains the militaristic side of it. Also to establish a government or regime, which is what they did here. But cosmos, or cosmine, also means to deck, adorn, equip or address, especially of women, which is one of the programs here. Thus, cosmos had an important secondary sense of ornaments of a woman's dress, decoration along with cosmocomes, meaning dressing the hair, and cosmetic as well as the universe and the world. And so women's dress sense and hair resembles the cosmos, meaning it's all over the place then, a bit like their closets. Just saying. And cosmic became cosmetic, whether genetic or otherwise. Now, Pythagoras is said to have been the first to apply this word to the universe, perhaps originally meaning the starry firmament, but it later was extended to the whole physical world, including the Earth. And that is because the Earth is in the universe, and so some common sense applied for a change. Now, for specific reference to the world of people, the classical phrase was oikumene, meaning the inhabited earth. Septuagint uses both cosmos and oikumene. Cosmos was also used in Christian religious writing in a sense of worldly life. This world as opposed to the afterlife. But the more frequent word for this was eon or aeon, literally meaning life, time or age. Now, after the first line, which had cosmos with a C, the rest of the descriptions are of cosmos with a K. And yet again, the K overlaying the C leads to confusion, mistranslation and meaning. The C to a K also changes the frequency of the word, and so also the spell casting and meaning as well. The word cosmos with a C often suggested especially the universe as an embodiment of order and harmony, except it has been anything but, as what appears as a random was not. It was how Source developed things, leaving things open to all possibilities, and then inspired by the free will thought processes of all the people and beings. But those clowns wanted to bring order, their type of order, as in control of. And thankfully their way of order is starting to come to an end, and the original will be restored once again. A further addition to the cosmic genetics and the from his story to our story narrative. And this is called the Nephilim reversal grids. The headquarter hub in the Stonehenge area acts as a final collection point by directing huge amounts of electromagnetic power through massive amounts of collected or stolen life force from multiple subsidiaries all over the planetary globe and the planetary grid lines, as well as the planetary gates. Now that was written back in the early 2000s. All that has now been reversed, and the energies are flowing into the people now, providing you embrace and integrate them. Also providing you are operating in the right way, because if you are not, you are suffering within this period and the future until you change you for the better. The archontic deception strategy is directly to inflict sexual misery, sexual abuse and sexual slaves on this planet, starting as early and young as possible. And this was taken advantage of by the negative aliens to splinter the soul energies, rather than integrate and heal it by controlling the sexual energies. And by promoting distortions around the sexual act, gender roles, and corrupting our relationship to our mother and father parents, our race descended into sexual misery and in many cases forms of sexual slavery and misogyny. And this is known as the sexual misery program, propagated and controlled by the moon chain lunar lineages of the negative aliens on the earth. And these are lineages not indigenous to the earth, but came through the process of invasion and deception. Now the moon chain are the lunar cults, whether knowingly or not, is related to the Jewish and Muslims in particular, but dances within Christianity, Buddhism and New Age cults. And these are multiple layers of architecture and mind control that have been artificially created to control, deceive, separate, confuse, torture and steal human beings' sexual life force, and it is and was a violation against the human soul. Now, the main collection centre for sexual misery is called the NRG network. That is the central hub in the UK. And it is designed to create psychopaths and sexual predators based on archontic deception behaviour. Now, given we did a recent piece on pedophiles in the UK having a large number, between 500 and 850,000, one suspects this technology has been the main driver of that repulsive behaviour. I believe with the new energies spiralling around the world now, has now encountered and overlaid that technology and is now driving people to heal. Known subsidiary networks exist or existed at every planetary stargate, such as Irangate, the Michael Murray reversal in Calgary, the Cathar grid lines southern France months ago, dragon moth snake networks in Asia. All are collected and returned to the UK for distribution off-planet for the Orion group and the Anunnaki Nibiru groups to parcel out. Not no more, it's not. There's a reason we were in the UK twice last year. The next thing to highlight is the blood covenant, which plays in nicely to the piece we did on blood and energons in the From His Story to Plus 24 show. And the blood covenant is the way that the false gods have chosen to trick humanity out of their original relationship with their one source creator, and hijack their sovereignty through the process of believing in the sanctioning of blood sacrifice or ritual bonds as acts of religious piety. And this brings in the Kali Ma program and the female menstrual blood ritual cycle, which is tied to the moon again, but also the blood sacrifices of all the tribal peoples as well. Now, these false father gods, for example, Yahweh and Jehovah, use blood covenants to communicate and interact with human beings. Notice it says the father gods, and why the Catholic Church deleted the mother figure. This is who the Catholics and the Christians are worshipping, with devastating consequences. But when a human being enters into a blood covenant through religious or other spiritual forms of indoctrination, this seals the person's aura or PSI field with a sigil or soul binding that states a claim onto that individual. Now, we have warned heavily about sigils and mantras, used heavily in the Indian and New Age cults. Now you have a deeper reason as to why. It could be described as a covenant of the snake, hence the Kundalini, Nagas, and reference to cobras, which is how they get you to sit doing yoga. And we covered that in 8A and 8C shows in From His Story to Our Story. And the person's free will is hijacked as the human has been tricked to believe that the Anunnaki extraterrestrials impersonating the one creator is actually a god. And when he and they are acting as an intermediary to take claim and ownership over human beings that were born with the inherent divinity of the inner Holy Spirit and inner Fhstos, not exterior spirit and Fhstos. Take note. But notice there is that word acting again, acting as an intermediary. Not only is all the world a stage, it appears all the universe is a stage as well. And this is why they label the famous actors and actresses as stars or superstars. Such decorations of grandeur are the realms of the dark forces. And these actors and actresses are part of their minion subset to distract the people from their true meaning and power. All operating as alphas, not a sigma amongst them, as they need others to fulfill and decorate their lives, all of which is done by the ignorant public themselves. Stop giving them your power and energy. Now the false gods both covet and hate the inner Holy Spirit, because it is the mother aspect of God of which they detest, just like the Catholic Church mentioned earlier. But also because they were not given the divine design of sovereignty that human beings were given in their free will right to choose. And that is another example of how they envy us in many ways, yet we do not see it or our own power. Now, as an example, a blood covenant is made with the Antichrist forces in the name of Yahweh, who transfers the soul-binding rights to the Moloch during circumcision. Yet again, linking the Anunnaki with the Jewish and their cult of death and harvesting. Now, the blood spilled from the baby during the circumcision marks a claim on the soul to be bound to the Moloch entity, which is directed to the Yahweh collective. An Anunnaki faction of the negative aliens that pose as false gods to lure humanity into servitude bindings in the afterlife. The afterlife. Another of the Jewish teachings says there is no afterlife, and you have to take everything in just one life. What an illusion that is. But is it a deliberate illusion? So the Israeli cult, who all worship Yahweh, are harvesting blood covenants from babies to mark a claim on the soul to be bound to Moloch. As for the afterlife, remember the only things you take with you to the afterlife and into the next reincarnation is karma and your soul development level obtained from previous lives. Attacks via energy thought forms and jinns are prevalent right now, and all of it is easily counteracted with the clearing, centering, grounding and shielding process you've been taught via the shows. But I've been hearing of people talking about how to do it that was not based on the details given in the shows, and this has led to wrong types of clearing and also shielding. Now you clear the ground you stand upon, as most of this planet's ground is corrupted by traumas. The next stage is getting yourself centered or balanced, which means you are upright and straight, all the chakras in alignment, and when comfortable with that, anchor yourself, which is grounding, to the spot that you have cleared. Then you do your shielding techniques. If it's just for you, then the grounding space would be 6 to 8 feet, and make sure you visualize it. If it is your home or workspace, then the field has to be wider to accompany the whole building. Now, energy forms generally occur at the temples or the third eye region. They come on sudden and should be dealt with immediately. Don't assume it is migraine. Envision putting a box around the negative energy region. Bundle that energy form into the box and return to sender with a force of 3, over and above what you received. If it doesn't go away, repeat the process with a force of 6, and if it still doesn't go away, repeat it again with a 9. Smoky beings flying through the air around you, often seen out of the corner of your eye, also need to be dealt with quickly as well. Envision a Faraday cage. If you don't know what that is, look it up on one of the search engines and get a visual, and then you will be able to create it in your mind. So envision a Faraday cage, trap the being in it and return it to source. An increase of awareness of those and happenstances around you is required now. Your thought patterns and any interference should be heightened for this next stage. They will attack you, so be on guard always, but never fear it or them. Try not to engage people who are not operating in the right way. Start acting differently towards yourself and others. That is their problem to deal with, not yours. Observe, don't absorb. And the best way is to stay positive, operate in love, not fear, and embrace and integrate the new frequencies. It matters not what the dark do, only what we do or don't. Indeed there is. Final piece tonight. Tonight's show ran parallel in America with what is known as the State of the Union, when in reality it is the State of the Onion. Why? Because it makes everyone cry. But we can all stop weeping by pushing forward the blueprint and making and being a true difference and change. We could run on the banner of hashtag no more clowns, enough is enough. But as the third leading Rothschild passed away last week, more and more of their control over the people dissipates. One could say, I guess they're not liking the frequencies too much. But all the Rothschilds family dying and other bloodline family controllers could go, and what is left? A world riddled with low self-worth and a lack of personal responsibility. Our task here is to change all that and chart a better path forward. The historic markers are all stacking up now, and we have to steel our resolve in pushing the blueprint into everyone's faces. This is our time, but we cannot do it with just the few within the group doing all the work, whilst many sit back and watch them struggle under the workload placed upon them. We all have to chip in to make it work and happen. We are making big inroads into their world and their psyche now. Imagine if more of you chipped in, the progress we could make. But in a world where cult is bandied around all too easily, most of which is never understood by the people saying it, I had a pondering recently of how we all celebrate collective consciousness as something to behold. But in overview, is that not a definition from certain people's perspectives of a cult? How we are all sharing the same thoughts, ideas, ways and experiences. In their world, that would be the definition of a cult, is it not? And we at THI have been labelled a cult by many outside the group, and it's the lazy man's excuse for not defining things themselves. But as a reminder, the original Santis embraced being called a cult, as it had a different definition back then, and also the fact that they understood many things better than we do today. They embraced the solar cult, the worship of the sun and its life-giving qualities, whilst the dark forces embraced the sacrificing moon worship. But there's nothing new under the sun, and so we all share the same collective consciousness, warts and all. One has to ask, what are you in particular putting out into the collective field? Love, truth, growth and happiness, or fear, lies, gossip, devolution and sadness? What is necessary to change a person is to change his or her awareness of themselves. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.